Hey everybody, welcome here. I'm excited to have Ben Dueck with us, and I'll get Ben to introduce himself a little bit, as I'm sure he will. But today we're talking about self-motivation tips for entrepreneurs, leaders, and managers, and I'm super excited to hear what Ben has to say. So thanks so much, Ben, for joining us and for being a part of this.
Hey, thanks, Richard, for having me. And I'm looking forward to kind of sharing some thoughts around this topic. It's one that I'm pretty passionate about. I will introduce myself a little bit later, but first, I want to just, for anyone who's listening in here, acknowledge the invisible monster that we have in the room, which is the exhausting, volatile cycle of struggle with temporary success, maybe a crash, maybe some more struggle of being an entrepreneur, a leader, or a manager. And of course, each of those roles might have slightly different angles on what that looks like. And maybe you're coming here feeling a little bit tired. Richard and I were just chatting before getting the recording going about feeling a little bit of that. And so hopefully today we can talk about some really important things here, keeping in mind that we are not all the same people. So I can't give a perfect solution that helps someone stay perfectly motivated all the time. But what I want to do is I want to provide a framework or pillars. I'm going to call them pillars that you can pull from, and potentially everyone who's listening can pull at least one small thing they can do to help stay more motivated and build more momentum within the work that they are doing. Now, part of this, of course, rests with how our brains work. We're going to be talking about the neuroscience of some of this. And sometimes we feel really excited when we get started with something. I think back to when I launched my business in 2019 of doing leadership development. And that baseline excitement, actually, just the way our brains work, it starts to drop within 60 to 90 days. It's this dopamine kind of drop after the excitement kicks in. And willpower alone, just kind of leaning into willpower, actually increases our cognitive load by over 20%. So it doesn't kind of lend itself to lasting uh, energy in the work that we're doing. And part of the challenge, whether you're an entrepreneur, a leader, or a manager, is that a lot of our work ends up being with people. People can be great and wonderful and inspiring and so valuable to have, but they can also be tiring and it can be challenging. So how do we find a good sweet spot in this? And in some ways, we've been sold a lie that high performers live in this constant state of inspiration and motivation. It's like, oh, they just must be always inspired, and but yet they actually don't. Motivation is actually a little bit of a short-lived spark that fades when the work gets a little bit grindy. And maybe it's better to talk about momentum, which we'll refer to today. And that, in some ways, is a physical law. When you build, friction-free practices and habits, we actually create a flywheel effect. And so maybe on days when your motivation might be at a 2 out of 10, your momentum keeps you performing at a higher level, whatever that level might be with things. And the pain of the grind, some of us can resonate with some of these statistics here. 53% of managers reported feeling burned out at work. 82% of senior leaders reported feeling exhausted. 71% of leaders said their stress levels surged upon taking their position. It's like, oh, there we go. Let's just make things harder on all of us. And then just as entrepreneurs, if you're an entrepreneur here and listening in, 42% of entrepreneurs have experienced burnout in the past month. It's not even like just in general, in the past month. And I know that I would resonate with that myself. There's been maybe not every month, but many months I feel some of that burnout. Gallup's actually done a lot of research around this. And they've asked just the average person about stress. And they asked the question, did you experience the following feelings during a lot of the day yesterday and stress? And so you can see over the last 17 years or so, that percentage has been getting higher and higher on average over time. And that's just for anyone, whether you're a leader, a manager, entrepreneur, whatever the case is. And maybe you've been told, oh, just grind it out. You just got to grind it out. But that's kind of a little bit of a myth. It doesn't mostly work. Doesn't mostly work. Grinding harder, it can kind of maybe cover the surface of what we want in regards to motivation and momentum. But if you're not fixing the foundation, if you're not kind of fixing the core, even grinding it out is only going to last a certain length of time. So you got to work hard, you got to grind, but grind with the right foundation, and that's what we're going to be talking about here today. So uh, I'm not immune to this. I've went through phases of burnout. I launched my leadership company, Cantera Leadership Inc. In 2019, and I also became an authorized business owner of Crestcom International about 2.5 years ago. And for me, I've went through different phases of burnout. I've went through different stages of needing to be motivated. And on top of this, I also spent a lot of time talking with other leaders, other managers, other entrepreneurs. And while the exact symptoms of what it looks like, or the exact way it acts itself out, or the exact impact on our business or our teams is different, a lot of the similar root causes are there. And so that's what I want to make sure we're talking about here today as we dive into this. One of the helpful ways to kind of do this is looking at how Gallup has done some research around this. So Gallup, if you're familiar with Gallup, you would know that they do a lot of research in the workplace around the world, and they've also done a lot of research around well-being. And they've identified what they call the 5 elements of well-being. And we're not going to dive too much into these exact 5 elements, but I think it's really helpful to kind of understand these 5 elements. And I'll just pop them here on the screen, but career, social, financial, physical, and community. And they've kind of looked at these and say, like, in order for us to kind of feel like we are thriving in our lives, all 5 of these areas need to be in a good place. That doesn't mean they're all going to be, perfect in order to be thriving, but the healthier you are in all 5 of these areas, the more effective you will be in just feeling like you're thriving. Which, and the reason why I bring that up, is because when we think of our roles as leaders and managers, if we're feeling burnt out or dragged down by any one of these 5, it's going to have an influence on the other areas as well. And you notice the first one on the list there is career, right? Is career. And I could spend a whole hour talking about each of these, so we're not going to kind of dive into these too much. But there's an interesting statistic when it comes to these 5. Gallup has found that only 7% of people are thriving in all 5 core areas of life, which they would call these 5 things you see on the screen. And some of us might say, okay, for me to feel good about things, I need to be maybe, you might say, physically more active or fit or whatever the case is, physically healthy. But they found that that actually isn't enough, right? People who thrive physically, for example, but fail in the other 4 elements, they miss 68% more work each year. They're about 3 times more likely to file a workers' compensation claim. They're 5 times more likely to actively look for a new employer or maybe an exit strategy out of their own venture. And they would not rate themselves kind of very happy about life. One of the questions they ask when they study this, by the way, I'll pop it on the screen. This is a straight screenshot from one of Gallup's publications on this. It says, please imagine a ladder with steps numbered from 0 at the bottom to 10 at the top. Suppose we say that the top of the ladder represents the best possible life for you, and the bottom of the ladder represents the worst possible life for you. On which step of the ladder would you say you personally feel you stand at this time? On a scale of 0 to 10. And then just your best guess on which step do you think you will stand in the future, say about 5 years from now, 0 to 10. And so they take these numbers and then they say for someone to be in a place that they call thriving, they need to answer 7 or above for the first question and an 8 or above for the second question. And then they're considered thriving. Interesting, right? So 32% of the world's population is able to fit into that 7 or above or an 8 or above. In Canada, we're higher. We're closer to about 65% people who are able to answer that positively. And of course, there's some variation year over year with that. So now let's dive into some of this a little bit more carefully, and not necessarily these 5 things, but I want to talk about 3 pillars. But before I talk about 3 pillars, I'm going to share a great quote with you from Thomas Schelling. We behave as if we're 2 different people, one who wants a lean body and another who wants dessert. And I feel that pressure in a lot of what I do myself, right? I want a successful business. I want to be self-motivated. I want to, have more calls with organizations and leaders and help change things. And I know the steps I need to take, but I also want to, sometimes take a break. I want to eat that dessert. And so how do you kind of work through that tension? And maybe these 3 pillars will help with that. So Three pillars to stay motivated. I know the picture has more than three pillars. In the background, there's a couple, but just bear with me. It's three pillars we're talking about here today. And the first thing that I want to talk about, the first pillar relates to understanding a little bit of our motivation around the why. Mark Twain says the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why. I love how Mark Twain has a way with words. And so the pillar one that I want to share with you, actually, before I share the pillars with you, let me just kind of put a little bit of a preamble on this. And as I share these pillars, I mentioned it earlier that there is no one size fits all. Okay. And in fact, some of what I'm going to say, you're going to be like, Ben, like, you're not telling me anything new. And that's probably because most of what I'm going to share is stuff that somewhere inside of you, you actually know that you either are already doing in some level or you should be doing and you aren't doing. And because when it comes to our psychology of our momentum or our success or motivation, the psychology of it is similar in many ways, although the expression of it is going to be different. So the first pillar that I want to talk about is purpose and clarity. And oh, my fading in there didn't quite go the way that in the order it should. But first thing I want to talk about is kind of that having that clarity of mission or having that clarity of purpose, right? So in uh, Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, she defines passion not as intense emotion, but as consistency over time toward a top level goal, your why. And it might be a little bit cliche-ish, but I think you really need to be clear on what your why is about what you're doing. And maybe you might find that challenging in the sense of, hey, like I'm a manager and I'm a manager of we create widgets, and I'm not really very excited about widgets. Uh, but there's other ways that you can kind of define your why. What does your why look like as a manager or a leader in regards to inspiring the people around you, to investing in them, to helping them grow? That might be your why, for example. But you need to have that clarity of your mission, of your why, so that you can then have more of that ability to be consistent over time. And when you think, what is grit? Grit is sustained interest and effort toward an ultimate goal that genuinely matters to you. So if you don't have a clear connection between what you do and your why, your purpose, your motivation will suffer. It's going to be hard to be motivated. It really will be. The other piece that I want to share with you as well is flexible goals versus cages. So this is a theory or philosophy that I really like to encourage for entrepreneurs and managers. They often set rigid targets, and then something goes wrong, something shifts, rigid goals end up snapping under that pressure. And what I mean by flexible goals is they still provide laser clarity on purpose while still leaving the pathway open to bend and adapt. And I'll give you a suggestion as to what that can look like. A grace, have goals, but don't use your goal as a cage because then if you don't reach it, you're just going to be crushed in how you feel. The other thing I encourage a lot of leaders I work with, in fact, I'm a Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach. Clifton Strengths is a tool used to identify your greatest opportunity for success by leaning into your strengths. What is to focus on your strengths? Using your natural strengths daily makes you 6 times more likely to be engaged in what you do. And in fact, all that really means, there's lots of layers of what that could mean, focusing on your strengths, but even just putting some language around your strengths and thinking about your strengths daily helps you feel better about what you do. Pretty simple, right? Pop your strengths on a piece of paper, have it by your computer, remind yourself regularly of how your strengths are there to make a difference for you. The other piece I'll add here as well is just process builds performance. Process builds performance. Goals, your why, and then the goals you might create around that, they definitely show you the destination and they maybe even give you some steps along the way, but systems and processes build the momentum. I'm not talking about necessarily rigid processes, although some of us may need that. And in some situations, you may need very rigid processes, especially if you're someone like me who struggles with focus from time to time. But James Clear talks about this in his book, Atomic Habits. Some of you might be familiar with that. He points out that winners and losers often have the exact same goals, right? They want to win, right? Every entrepreneur wants a thriving, profitable business. Every Olympic athlete wants to win the gold medal or succeed at their sport. So the goal itself isn't what separates them, it's the systems and processes that they follow to make incremental progress every day. So relying on just goals creates this binary trap. It's that cage I was talking about. You're either failing because you haven't reached the goal yet, or you feel a temporary high when you hit it, followed by a sudden drop in motivation. But loving the process and loving the steps you need to go through keeps your baseline energy consistent regardless of short-term outcomes. So you may need to break down your goals that you have into these smaller steps and processes that aren't as relied upon, or at least not in the same way as what a goal might be. So, some purpose and clarity, quick ideas you might want to lean into. Schedule focus and big picture time into your calendar. This is where you can think about your why. This is where you can think about some of that strategy that can really just clarify maybe the steps and the direction you need to be moving in regards to purpose and clarity. A lot of leaders I talk to, they're lucky if they get 30 minutes of quiet time in their day or like downtime, if that, right? And they feel all this pressure to just be perform, 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 perform. And yet, the leaders that I coach, often I encourage them, hey, like, what would it look like for you to just to set up 30 minutes on every day in your calendar, block it in, where you are able to think about the things that you know you should be thinking about, but you're not doing. That's going to help you be clear on where you need to go. I also like the philosophy of floor and ceiling goals. Floor and ceiling goals. Now you might wonder, what am I talking about? So floor and ceiling goals is instead of saying, hey, I need to make 10 sales calls today, maybe you say, hey, I'm going to make a minimum of three and a maximum of 15. That's my window. That's my floor and ceiling. Now maybe that floor and ceiling doesn't make sense to you. You can set up a floor and ceiling for you yourself that would work, but maybe you can view goals a little bit differently in that way. And then also capture and place your why. What I mean by that is oftentimes we've thought about our why. Maybe we have it written somewhere on our office wall, but we don't look at it very often. Maybe you need to make it more prominent. Maybe you need to put it on your desktop background. Maybe you need to put it right on your monitor where you spend hours a day staring. Might be helpful to remind yourself of it and read it from time to time to keep yourself sharp and fresh on that. So that's pillar one. Let's look at pillar two, energy and fuel. Some of you are saying, Ben, what is this? How does this relate to self-motivation, right? But physical energy is the baseline currency of motivation. When physical well-being drops, our sharpness drops, our emotional patience drops, our ability to do hard work plummets. So I want to talk to you about a few things here. Most of these things you probably know, but maybe it'll be a good reminder or a kick in the pants to kind of get some stuff done in a different way. I like to talk about the big three, okay? The big three: sleep, food, and exercise. Most of you know this, right? Get better sleep, eat healthier food, exercise, but also be outside more often. Be outside more often. Uh, Being outdoors is shown, especially if you're able to go outside in the mornings with the sunshine shining outside, whether it's minus 30 or plus 30 outside, uh, to increase your ability to focus and to have energy for the rest of the day. In fact, exercise, and especially exercising outdoors, is shown to be more effective for increasing our physical and mental well-being than medications for things like anxiety and depression. Now, I'm not saying don't take those medications, right? If you're listening to this, talk to your doctor, do the things you need to do, but maybe consider adding more of that to your uh, things that you do each day. And you might say, Ben, I don't got enough time. No time for that. I'm too busy. It's an investment. You have to view these things as an investment in your ability to stay motivated and focused. The other piece that I'm going to encourage you as well is design convenience. So, what I mean by designing convenience, behavioral economics shows that over 80% of our daily choices are decided by convenience, not intent. So, if healthy fuel isn't your default, your tired brain will automatically crave sugar. So, maybe you got to put some of that healthy food in a much easier place to access and your unhealthy foods in a much harder place to access, right? Get a key, lock it up, save the sugar for special events, and put the carrots and the broccoli somewhere easier to access. Put healthy food at eye level in your fridge. They've shown that to make a difference, interestingly enough. Put your phone in a place you can't reach so you don't doom scroll. Make it easy to consume the healthy snacks that you want. And the other thing is hack your schedule. Hack your schedule. What I mean by hacking your schedule relates a little bit to that thing in your calendar that I talked about earlier. Uh, you can spend time if you put it in your calendar, but most of us don't put it in our calendars. Also, when I talk about hack your schedule, try to combine things in your schedule. Some of you might have heard about habit stacking. James Clear talks about that. Great book, by the way, Atomic Habits. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to take a look at that book. Habit stacking. So, if before you, what's a good example of habit stacking? So, have your floss roll right beside your toothbrush rather than in a different drawer somewhere else. Because then, hey, you need to floss your teeth. It's not necessarily a work related idea, but it relates to similar things like that in how you can hack your schedule. Here's a few quick hitters. Start doing the 3-2-1. So here's what I mean by the 3-2-1. This is to help you sleep better at night. We all know we need to get better sleep. The 3-2-1 is before bedtime. 3 hours before bed, don't eat any more food. 2 hours before bed, don't drink any more liquids. And 1 hour before bed, no more screens. That's the 3-2-1. If you follow those three things, you will sleep better. If you are cramming in snacks late at night, drinking too many fluids, and if you're on your screen, you're going to have some challenges. As an entrepreneur, as a business leader, we're all in meetings, probably more than we want to be. I'm a big fan of walking meetings when you're able to. In fact, even walking calls. If you're going to be calling someone, say, hey, can we do this while I'm walking? And it gives you an opportunity to get out, get your steps in, and have a conversation. And maybe you're breathing a little bit harder, so you might want to be careful which kind of meetings you're having as you're walking. But for the most part, you're probably going to be able to find quite a few meetings that could work. The final little quick idea, this one's going to seem so lame. It's so simple. A giant water bottle. A giant water bottle. Our energy levels crash when we are dehydrated. And guess what? Most people suffer from dehydration. So to stay motivated, to stay energetic, to stay focused on the work that you want to do, you have to keep the hydration levels up. Simplest way to do that, get yourself, and notice how I say giant. Like, yeah, just go out. Someone I talked to had like a 1 gallon giant metal water bottle they carried around. It was like just huge. And they said they did it that way because they didn't want the hassle of getting up and going to refill that to be a barrier to filling up their water bottle to be a barrier to drinking more water, right? That's that convenience side of things. Final pillar that I'm going to talk about, and to be honest, I could talk about all three of these pillars in much more depth. I could do a whole session on goal setting. I could do a whole session on our well-being. I could do a whole session on this one as well, relational support. Here's what I hear almost across the board from every entrepreneur, every leader, every manager. Leadership is lonely. It's lonely. And isolation and loneliness drains motivation faster than a heavy workload. So sustainable momentum requires strong ties relationally with others. The first principle here, the power of one. Leaders who report having at least one trusted confidant outside business operations, spouse could be their mentor, best friend, are 35% less likely to suffer from some mental health issues like chronic anxiety and burnout. Just having one. The power of six. The 6 hour rule. This one's an interesting one. Gallup did some research around this, and you might think this is unrealistic, and maybe it is, but I'll still share it with you because it sets a target. Gallup data shows that aiming for roughly 6 hours of social connection per day. Now, that can be work relationships, that can be home relationships, family, friends, trusted colleagues, dramatically lowers stress levels. So I do a lot of my work independently. I have a small team, but I'm often in my office alone with the work that I do. So I know that there's days where I don't get 6 hours of social connection per day. And yet I need to lean into this more often myself, the power of six. Maybe you can't do 6 hours. What can you do, right? What can you do? And the final power, I stuck with the theme here, the power of pruning. Okay, the power of pruning. Motivation and energy aren't just drained by tasks, they're also drained by high friction, toxic, or unsupportive relationships. You may need to actively manage some of those relationships, those energy leaks in your network. And if you are a business owner, leader, or manager, you may even have people on your team that are toxic to you. And I know it's tough, and don't use this as a kind of across the board necessarily, but sometimes you're probably holding on to people on your team longer than you should because we're all pretty nice people, and sometimes we're too nice. So maybe there's someone that's on your team that's just causing toxicity. Now, I'm not saying the first step is to get rid of these people. You might have some steps you lead up towards having some really good coaching, accountable conversations with these individuals and letting them know, hey, here's some areas that we need to work on. But also, some of those people are not worth having on the team if they're going to keep dragging you and others down because it just drains motivation. Some quick ideas. Get a mentor. Get a mentor or even a coach. Mentoring and coaching is different. But a mentoring, if you don't have either one of those, a mentor or a coach, I encourage you to do so. But a mentor could be someone in your industry. Maybe it's someone at your current workplace. Maybe it's someone that does something similar to you if you're, leading your business, who you can go and talk to and say, hey, like, love to hear your thoughts on this. Get advice from them. Let them share their wisdom with you. Try to find someone that has at least some crossover with some of what you do so they can get it, right? So they understand it. Not necessarily industry specific. It could be industry specific, but someone who understands. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, find another entrepreneur that's maybe a little further along in their journey that you can have as a mentor. If you're a leader, manager within your organization, find someone either within the organization or outside. Join a business group or other kind of group that you can go and connect with. I hear a lot of positive things from this. Find the right group to do this. Not every group is good, but find a group that fits for you where you can talk about some of the things that you're going through. Remember, leadership is lonely, entrepreneurship is lonely. Talk to people. And the last one I already shared at a different previous one as well is just more walking meetings, right? Like go walk with people, shoulder to shoulder. There's actually something as even like in person where you're able to walk together and that is different. You almost like you tear down barriers between you and that other individual in a different way when you're going and walking together. I love this African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. If you want to go far, go together. So you might say, hey, Ben, I'm a solopreneur. It's just me. And maybe you're listening to this and that's what you are. And I got no one else. I encourage you to look for other people that are in similar shoes to you. There are a lot of solopreneurs out there that feel that loneliness, that feel that challenge. Maybe you also can connect with a trusted friend. Maybe you have a spouse, maybe you don't. I know it can be hard to know how much to share with your spouse as well around some of the stresses of the business, but hopefully you're able to find someone where you can feel that connection together. And then encourage you to take action around this. And the power of 1% is what I like to always talk about when it comes to taking action with people. Burnout can happen, or it can be really hard to stay away from burnout when we try to overall haul our lives overnight. Right? We're not going to get to the top of Mount Everest with one giant step. We're just going to hurt ourselves and hurt others. Sometimes our steps are too big. Again, I'm going to talk about atomic habits. Uh, James Clear, he talks about the power of 1%. Improving by just 1% in one element of your well-being every day compounds exponentially over a year. So by making micro shifts, you end up becoming, if you do the math, I haven't done the math personally, but this is what I've been told, 38 times better by year's end if you're going up by 1% every day. So my encouragement for you is to not look at the things that I've encouraged around self-motivation for you and say, hey, I got to do all these things, but to pick one thing. And what can you do tomorrow to start that one thing? So one of the suggestions I gave, for example, was the blocking time in your calendar. And maybe say, Ben, I can't do 30 minutes in my calendar every day. Okay, well, what does 1% look like? Maybe it's 30 minutes once a week. It's like running a marathon. You don't wake up and run a marathon tomorrow. You start going on that one step at a time, right? First, you go buy yourself some shoes. You learn how to stretch properly the next day. Maybe you go for a walk the day after that. And you build over time. And one day, as you exponentially grow your impact, you're able to see that transformation. I'll also give you one more kind of piece of advice around this that James Clear talks about. I mentioned it earlier, habit stacking, right? Maybe something for you, you can habit stack by saying, hey, after I pour my morning coffee, might be your current habit that you do every morning, I will text my mentor my one goal for the day, or whatever that might be. After I close my laptop at the end of the day, I will write down three things that I need to remember to do tomorrow. Right? It's habit stacking. It's using something that already happens every day and building something on top of that. But which pillar will you focus on? Here's our three pillars: purpose and clarity, energy and fuel, and relational support. Is there one that you want to lean into? Hopefully, something has caught your ear here in this 30 minutes that we've been talking. Um, Take a step, put it down, talk to someone about it, make it happen. Now, if you want a special free resource that talks about this, I've got a QR code. It's on the screen. You can scan off your phone. And this is, I don't know, Richard probably doesn't like QR codes because it's, I'm not sure how secure those are in security things, but I
This
promise
one
you,
should be fine.
this one should be fine. It'll take you to a Google form that just asks you to fill out your name and your email. And I don't have the resource completely finished yet. I was actually working on it and I ran out of time, but sometime in the next week, or maybe shortly after, if you're watching this later, maybe I already have it ready, and I'll send it out to you as soon as possible, as well as a PDF of the slide deck that we just went through as well. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's one of my favorite places to connect with people, but I also have one of my email addresses on the screen here as well. I'm passionate about helping people identify the gap between where they are and where they can be, whether you are an entrepreneur, a leader, or a manager. And I hope that you're able to take a step bridging that gap today. Thanks, Richard, once again for having me here, and hope people took something from this time together.